Do you sometimes wonder how your friends react differently to you, and how sometimes they could be cool, calm, and collected in the face of crisis, whereas you're losing yourself? Or vice versa, at times where you're very comfortable and confident, they are falling apart. Have you noticed how each person has such a unique way to reach a solution or a resolution in a problem? Reason is that most people operate on emotions. Some people are very good at regulating that and keeping it in check, whereas other people are complete slaves to their emotions and let it take over them, be it excitement, sadness, whatever that is. So knowing and learning how to control that, how to be on top of that and understand how to manage it will give you a great advantage over people around you who are not emotionally mature or understand themselves. Having strong emotional maturity is literally the biggest asset you can have to navigate both life and the most meaningful relationships around you. So I cannot stress enough how important it is for us to get to an emotional mature state and to understand what emotional maturity is. If you haven't been to my page before, welcome. I'm Hamasa. I look at personal development as well as mental and emotional well-being and just day-to-day issues. Please do subscribe to my page so that you're up to date with my content. And for those of you who are coming back, welcome back. So certain signs give away that you're emotionally mature. And I will try and list them so that in whatever areas you feel that you're not really doing your utmost best or showing up at your best version of yourself, then you can work on that. But the first sign of understanding that you're emotionally mature is knowing and understanding the emotions that you feel and identifying them. Because if you don't know what you're feeling, how are you then supposed to resolve that and find a solution and manage it? So if it's frustration you feel because you didn't win a game, then acknowledge that emotion that is frustration. If it's hurt you feel because someone has let you down, then acknowledge that you're feeling hurt. Or if it's anger, then acknowledge that you're feeling anger. Whichever emotion that you're feeling, you need to be able to identify that, understand that emotion. And that's the only way you will be able to get yourself out of that situation and that mindset. Because most times people are feeling a certain way and they're feeling dismayed and just anxious, but they don't actually know what that emotion is or what's causing it. They can't pinpoint it. And then they're all over the place because they don't know how to fix it and come out of this mindset. Second sign that you're emotionally mature is if you can draw out healthy boundaries and maintain them. Because with boundaries, this is where the problem is. It's easy to establish them and understand that this is not something I like and this is a boundary of mine. But then actually implement it and maintain it is where people kind of crumble. Especially if you're an empath or someone who's highly sensitive, then you will find it harder to maintain those boundaries or stick it out because you feel guilty and you tend to prioritize other people over your own wants and needs. So having and applying healthy boundaries is a form of protection for you, not necessarily to be a nuisance for the people around you. And the sooner you can wrap your head around that my boundaries are a form of protection, not necessarily me telling people what to do, is the easier it'll become for you to start applying those boundaries. There is a big difference between prioritizing oneself and being outright selfish. So it's important for us to note that and distinguish that I can prioritize myself without putting other people at a disadvantage. So that's when it's a sign of emotional maturity, that you can prioritize yourself. Let's say someone needs your help and they need it right now. and you're not in a position to be able to give that help right now, that doesn't mean that you don't want to help or that you're being selfish. It just means that you explain to the person and tell them that right now you're not able, but you can be there tomorrow. And so you're prioritizing your needs, that you can't necessarily tear yourself in half and go and be there for that person, but it doesn't mean that you're also being neglectful. And that is a sign of emotional maturity. And also, it doesn't mean that you always have to do something for the person. It's just understanding that if someone is kind of taking advantage of you, then you know where to draw the line and you're not being selfish. But if someone genuinely wants your help, then you can distinguish between that and help when and where you want. The next sign of being emotionally mature is owning up to your mistakes. Unfortunately, we live in a society, in a culture that admitting one's faults is a huge sign of weakness. So nobody wants to take responsibility. Everybody's shifting blame. But people who are emotionally mature, one, understand that their ego is not more important than that relationship. And so they can put the ego aside and show and prioritize the relationship they have with that person, as that this is more important to me than my ego, so I'm happy to acknowledge where I went wrong or what I did that upset you. And two, it's not just showing the other person that you can put your ego aside, but it's also you learning from it. There is nothing wrong with taking responsibility for your mistake. Nobody is perfect and everybody will make mistakes. It's how we deal with mistakes afterwards that determines who is emotionally mature and who isn't. Making a mistake doesn't determine if you're emotionally mature or not. It's the aftermath of it that does. So if you could own up to where you went wrong or the part that you had to play in something going wrong, and you could take responsibility and you can apologize and work on it and acknowledge it, then that shows huge signs of confidence in yourself and your ability, because there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. It's if you can fix them and pick ourselves back up, that matters. Another telltale sign of emotional maturity is you always take time before you react. You don't react, you respond. So a lot of people who are not emotionally mature tend to take the leap and not really think of the consequences and the outcomes. Whereas people who are emotionally mature have that ability to pull themselves back a little, have a bit of a bird's eye view over the situation, and then make a decision accordingly and think of the consequences and the outcomes of their decision. So being able to control that urgency and that rush is a massive sign of emotional maturity. Being able to effectively communicate your wants and needs is another sign that you're on the right track when it comes to your emotional maturity. Reason is, when you can't express what you need and want clearly and get your message across and convey how you feel, then you're not really giving anyone any ground or anything to work with. So therefore, you're both in a state of confusion and just miscommunication. So being able to clearly speak of how you feel and feel your emotions and keep you cool in face of adversity, and not backtrack, stick to your word, is signs that you're confident in what you're feeling and thinking. You've acknowledged and recognized the emotions. Then you can clearly and effectively communicate what your problem is. Emotionally mature people have a tendency of understanding when, where, and how they should communicate. And that's a very important skill to have, to understand the right time and how you should speak about the things that are bothering you. Then you will get the best results. The next thing, and I personally think is the most important thing, is that the difference in understanding that emotional maturity doesn't necessarily mean intellectual intelligence. So just because someone is extremely smart doesn't mean that they are emotionally mature. So self-awareness is the most vital ingredient in emotional maturity. And self-awareness doesn't rely on intellect. Self-awareness includes our intuition, our thoughts, and our heart. So being aware of the other senses that we have and merging them together to become more self-aware is the basis of being emotionally mature, because understanding oneself and self-awareness is when you make yourself the topic of your thoughts and discussions and analysis and reflection. So you continuously and constantly working on yourself and reflecting on your emotions and on your reactions and why and how, where they came from, why you felt like that. So when you're self-aware and you're using your intuition and senses and things to kind of suss out the vibe of the room, the energy of the people around you, then it's very easy for you to understand the situation and judge it and kind of figure out what's the best way to go forward. The idea of self is based on cognitive and emotional structures. So cognitive obviously is your brain, so if you're smart or not smart or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a reflection of your emotional state. So being able to master your emotional side of your oneself is incredibly important, because that will determine and make you understand your needs and wants. When you're very self-aware and understand yourself very well, your full focus and attention is mainly on yourself and your self-development, then you know what you want, what you don't want, what you like, what you dislike. And when you know those things, you can then use them and determine which direction your life takes. And so you're not that dependent on other people affecting your decisions. You can make decisions confidently and stick with them. And you don't need validation from other people to make you feel confident or make you feel like you're doing the right thing. You know you're doing the right thing. You have enough self-trust in your decision making. That's why being self-aware, I think, to me, is the most important part of emotional maturity. And finally, someone who's emotionally mature is a good listener. Most times, as an empath, you tend to be a good listener anyway. So someone who wants to be emotionally mature does have empathy. It's a big part of being emotionally mature, is understanding that other people's behaviors, reactions are a projection of themselves and not of you. So you have that kind of empathy anyway towards people, because you don't judge them in how they're behaving towards you. You're just like, it's nothing to do with me, it's their issues, they have insecurities. So you being able to do that and sympathize with people's traumas and people's lives and people's behaviors is already made you an empath and a better listener. So it's important for us to be able to listen without judgment, without having to give feedback, without having to jump to conclusions, and really make other people feel like they could speak to us without us being subjective. Emotional maturity is a key ingredient in having a more fulfilled and a better quality of life and relationships. But understand that mastering emotional maturity does not happen overnight. It's like a slow progress built on experiences. The way for you to become more emotionally mature is for you to go through certain things and come out of them, and then reflect and understand how and why you came out of it the way you did. But having said that, it doesn't mean that it will take you years and years to become emotionally mature. You could experience a lot of things in a short period of time. Or if you just have a general positive outlook on life and try and keep a more optimistic perspective on things and just being a little more self-aware, then that emotional maturity kind of is around the corner. It just comes to you naturally. So it's just about being aware of certain things, looking for these signs, and always reflecting back. I hope that you guys found this video helpful. Thank you so much for joining me and watching this. Please do subscribe to my page, like and comment on this video, and I will see you guys here again next week. Thanks for watching. Mwah.